How do you teach an entire workforce to think with AI rather than just use it? That is the question that sits at the heart of today's conversation. And as organisations race to integrate AI into their operations, many are beginning to discover that real transformation doesn't come from tools alone. They actually come from people who know how to collaborate with them. So today I'm going to be joined by the VP of Strategy at a company called Augury. And we will discuss what true AI literacy means in practice. And he will share with us why he believes AI fluency is becoming as fundamental as reading and writing in the workplace. And as we're entering a 5-year adoption cycle faster than any major technology before it, we'll also talk about why the best workers won't be those who master code, but those who master curiosity, judgment, and emotional intelligence. So whether you're leading teams, entering the job market, or just wondering how AI will reshape your role, today's episode should help you embrace AI as a trusted thinking partner rather than a distant innovation. But what does it mean to build an AI literate organisation? And what happens for those that don't? But before we jump into today's conversation, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for helping make this show possible, because it's their support that allows me to keep producing and sharing over 60 conversations every month across the Tech Talks network right now. Producing conversations with the people that are shaping the future of technology and business. And it's partnerships like this that help me keep these stories coming to you. If you've been listening to any podcast on Tech Talks Network for a while now, you will know I'm always trying to find practical tools that make security feel less like a chore. Security that doesn't frustrate users or slow them down from doing their work. And Nord Layer is one of them. It's built for real businesses, the kind that have people working in multiple cities, countries, time zones, and networks. But best of all, it gives you enterprise-level security without the enterprise-level headache. Setup literally takes minutes, and it scales as your team grows, and it protects you against the kind of threats that never make the headlines until it's too late. And it's one of those rare tools that just works quietly in the background. So why not give your team the protection that they deserve? Visit nordlayer.com/techtalksdaily and use the coupon code TechDaily-28 and you'll even get 28% off your plan, part of a special Black Friday deal that we've got at the moment. So check that out and let me know your thoughts. But now, let's get today's guest on. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me again on this podcast, Neil. I think this is the third time. So my name is Artem Kroupenev, and I head strategy at a company called Augury, where I've been for the last about 10 years. And what we do is provide predictive maintenance, machine health solutions for industrial companies. The larger space is industrial AI. And we essentially combine hardware sensors that we put on machines and tell maintenance technicians, reliability professionals at large factories around the world exactly what's wrong with their machines, how to fix them, when, at the level of component. And then they avoid downtime and they're able to keep their factories running and to produce all the wonderful things that we need. So that's what Augury does in a nutshell. And we're a global company. We're one of the first unicorns in the industrial AI space. We've been in that space of applying artificial intelligence to these hard engineering problems for well over a decade. And today we work with almost 200 large global and medium-sized manufacturers, industrial companies across different segments. So anything from medicine to diapers to food and beverage to oil and gas, chemicals, building materials, you name it. And we're proud to be able to support, the production of the basic necessities of life by making sure that machines don't fail and that production lines keep running smoothly.
And I think we first spoke in 23, then we spoke again last year. So it's great to have you complete your hat trick of appearance here in 2025. Always a pleasure to sit down with you. But I mean, one of the things that's always stood out to me is how you've compared AI literacy to basic reading and writing. And a few years ago, that might have been a stretch, but it certainly isn't now. But what do you think it means right here today in practical terms for today's workforce?
Well, I think it's accelerating in many
Yeah.
ways. But also the tools, the applications, and the way we utilize it becoming simpler, right? So when we talked about literacy, maybe a couple of years ago, it was not the same level of ease of use and access as it is today. And those tools and capabilities are becoming much, much better today. I think, the way I think about it is that, let's say for business software or business capabilities, things like spreadsheets and word processing from the 1980s throughout the 1990s and today, it took probably around 15 to 20 years for the adoption of that type of technology within the business world across the board. And, there's still some organizations that use paper forms, right? And don't utilize digital documents, which sounds a little crazy, today's that's still the case. Then, you think about the next wave of something like email, right? Which is internet-based technology. The adoption of email took something like 10 years within the business world, especially within kind of the Western business world. And today, that's obviously ubiquitous, foundational. There are very few mail rooms around, even though there may be here and there. So it's not, when I think about the adoption of a technology like what we see today, AI, generative AI, I don't think it's crazy to think that, again, we'll go from, 20 years to 10 years. Now it might be 5 years or so. And the reason for that is not just because, just the general adoption of technology is accelerating. It's because the rails, the infrastructure is already there, right? So whereas for, word processing spreadsheets, you needed to have a computer at every worker's desk to be able to use it. And for email, you actually had to have, computers both in the office and also on the go. So you had to have mobile phones to accelerate that adoption. Mobile phones and computers already exist, right? For the majority of people, both in kind of the knowledge workspace and more also in the manual space. So the infrastructure is there, so the adoption is going to be much faster, right? And the other piece is that the way the AI capabilities are being integrated, they're being integrated into the existing ways of working much better than some of those previous technologies. So you had to actually learn how to use a spreadsheet back in the day. Email was more straightforward, but you still had to kind of learn the etiquette and capabilities of how to send back and forth messages and when you're available and so forth. Today, with AI, it kind of gets integrated into the existing workflows, right? So you can, ask a question about a document and then have it, have the document written for you, or you can start a workflow on some kind of business problem where the same way as you would ask an intern or a researcher to do a preliminary brief for you, for instance, you can actually start that workflow with AI. So I think that's the other reason why we will see adoption much faster. And so that level of literacy, being able to use AI as part of your daily workflow, is more readily available than I would say any other digital technology before. And therefore, I think it will be vastly accelerated.
And there will be many people listening that still see AI as like a specialized skill. So on that side of things, can you just expand on why you believe it's more likely becoming a universal expectation rather than just a differentiator, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's a specialized skill beyond the realm of people who are actually building AI tools,
Yeah.
right? On the user end, it is it does what it does require is a slightly different way of approaching problems. Um, so when you think about starting to work with AI, um, your instinct would traditionally be to do something manually, to think through a problem by yourself or maybe with some colleagues. Whereas here, you would need to think about AI as not just as a tool, but maybe as a companion in a sense to start making the right types of decisions and to actually start your workflow with a draft that begins with AI, right? And so I think that type of change is something that is more of a mindset issue than anything else. But being able to do that is not, for somebody who knows how to read and write and works in this environment, it's not that far of a reach, right? It's not a specialized skill. It is rather more of a mindset change in how you actually start and implement your workflow with AI.
And one of the things that increasingly concerns me is that for younger people that could be listening out there, they're in education at the moment, studying for jobs that might not even exist yet. And then if they do get out of education, they're looking for a role. Many of those early entry level jobs are disappearing. So how do you see AI changing the nature of entry level work, and what kind of tasks are most at risk of automation, and what should younger audiences be doing, younger listeners be doing then? Apologies, I've thrown about 8 questions in one there, but how do you see that panning out?
Yeah, I think I think the overall pie of knowledge work and jobs in general is going to increase.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the overall pie is decreasing, but there's a resegmentation of the entry level jobs, and how that's going to propagate is very difficult to predict today. And one of the examples, this is very recent, is that with AI being highly accurate at radiology, right? So identifying essentially issues through radio imaging, and kind of providing diagnostics based on that. AI has become extremely accurate, and there are thousands of models today that do that pretty well. And you would think that would actually reduce the number of radiologists in the market, but that's not the case because the number of open jobs and positions for radiologists is much higher than it used to be just 2 years ago. So why is that? The reason for that is that when something becomes cheaper and it's an actual needed good, you actually use more of it, right? So, one example is, back in the day, 30, 40 years ago, you would think twice about making an international phone call because it was so expensive, and you would not talk to your relatives potentially in a different country for months because of that. Today, you can just FaceTime them, and it's free. And so you are much more connected to people abroad because the cost of doing that call, making that call, is essentially has gone to zero, right? And so the same thing happened in radiology, where the cost of performing those exams that used to take weeks to do and to interpret and so forth now is much lower, and therefore the hospitals are ordering many more of those exams because they want to create a much more comprehensive diagnostic for their patients, and therefore radiologists are more in demand to take those exams. So I think, or to provide that type of service. So I think that the same is going to happen to a lot of entry-level jobs that we kind of are afraid about today. We will see a reshuffling in terms of demand for certain types of activities, but other types of activities are actually going to grow almost exponentially because you are going to need people at the front lines in order to be able to manage, to provide access, to provide something more of a service, to provide judgment. There are many different skills that humans will have to provide as the overall pie increases.
And if AI inevitably takes over more repetitive and analytical tasks, which I think it will, I'm curious from your vantage point here, what new skills will define value for human workers in the next few years? I would imagine things like curiosity and emotional intelligence are quite high up on that list, but anything else that you see there?
Yeah, I think that definitely curiosity, emotional intelligence, the ability to provide judgment and taste.
Yeah.
So one of the things that AI still doesn't do very well is kind of really figure out what is absolutely tasteful, right? Necessary, needed, but also in a way elegant in terms of a solution for people. And people are very good at that in general. And I think that kind of defining not just the ability to perform a task, but also be very tasteful in how the outcome of that task and what great looks like comes out is going to be absolutely critical. The other pieces are, of course, creativity. It's thinking on both the emotional level and also the intellectual level, and skills that are typically called people skills, right? So emotional intelligence, but being able to essentially interact with human beings very effectively is going to be important. So I think those are going to be valued more than highly technical skills in kind of in the workforce overall. And also I think one of the other things that are going to be very important for people is collaboration. So being able to work both with AI, but also with other people in kind of a way that creates better outcomes, whether it's brainstorming or work groups, or just kind of having back and forth communication that delivers a more creative outcome for work, is going to be incredibly highly valued. And that also requires not just integration, like I said, of being able to work with people, but also you have to integrate AI into that process to the effect of essentially making everybody's lives easier and creating something that's brilliant and creative.
And on the other side of the table, from the employer's perspective, what should their companies be doing when rethinking hiring and training strategies to build that genuine AI fluency across their teams that's needed to succeed ultimately?
One of the things that we're still not seeing, right? So when we read reports about how effective is AI and actually moving the needle for businesses, and how the adoption of AI is actually impacting business outcomes, we're seeing mixed results. And there have been some studies recently that said, okay, businesses are not actually seeing a tremendous improvement in from an introduction of AI. But we also need to understand that literacy has to propagate not just through the people, right? And not just getting the upskilling of the people and changing some of the mindsets. It also needs to propagate eventually through the business processes, through the strategy of the company, and we need to figure out the right metrics to measure it. So I think what we're doing right now is measuring the outcomes of introducing AI into the business world with pre-AI metrics, right? So we'll need a new set of metrics, new set of KPIs at the business level to really measure those outcomes and those results. Eventually will be some form of productivity management and measurement, but it will be different than the way we, I think, approach it today. But I think businesses fundamentally need to think about this as a core skill, a core capability, and I would say have to integrate AI into the work processes of every employee. So there are a number of companies, primarily tech companies out there, where the CEOs have come out and said, off the bat, for every person, if you're not using, AI as part of your workflow, even if you don't start your workflow with some kind of draft that AI can provide you, you're behind the curve, right? So start by including AI into your workflow and start thinking about what are the different use cases that you can apply it for in your day-to-day decisions and your outputs and your inputs and so forth. And I think that mindset is what is absolutely necessary for business leaders everywhere. And then you can start seeing, that adoption and that creativity take place within the organization. And this is exactly what we did at Augury. Quite early on, we said that every person needs to allocate time to be able to implement AI in some capacity into what they're doing, and then share the results, share the outcomes. And we've seen really a kind of a boom of productivity in terms of people coming with ideas, creating that type of implementation, and then showing those use cases to others, right? And so for a lot of the employees now at Augury, we have kind of AI as a fundamental part of how they work in some capacity. But the muscle that we're trying to develop is not just to develop, clear use cases. Here are the 5 things that you need to do. Here's how you use it. But rather, you have to be creative fundamentally with it as part of your daily work. And every day, just try to create something new, something that is slightly incrementally more helpful to you. And then just becomes part and parcel of how you work day to day.
And for individual workers, what would you say are the first practical steps that they should be taking towards developing those fundamental AI literacy skills beyond using tools like, I don't know, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, etc.? There's so many different tools. They've been around for several years now. So what should they be doing to further develop their AI literacy?
Well, I think that we have a pretty massive rollout of AI as part of a lot of the different tools that they use, right?
Yeah.
Software tools and capabilities. So almost every ERP system, or even industrial systems where the world where we exist, some part of it is enhanced by AI or even directly affected by AI capabilities. So from that perspective, a lot of the time they don't really need to change their workflow. But that utilization of AI as a companion, right? And thinking about, even as a thinking partner, utilize AI in terms of, well, how do I solve this problem better? Who else should I approach? How else should I approach this problem? What else can we do here? What kind of insight can you provide me? And then if you don't get the right level of insight, then you can actually start thinking about what other tools are available for you and for your organization to pull it in. And I think we've seen that push for us as well at Augury, given Augury's example, is that we've seen employees starting to show, see the limits of what some of the current AI tools that we have, but not just, put their hands up and say, okay, well, this thing doesn't do what I actually wanted to do, so I'm going to, I'm going to give up. But they're saying, well, they're proactively looking outside and finding new tools that will solve that problem for them. And we've created a budget for them to be able to do that, right? So to actually experiment with new tools, new capabilities, and a simpler process for doing that. So if you're an employee, there's easy ways to test out tools and capabilities just through search that will fix a certain problem that your current tools or your current AI capabilities are not able to solve for you. And so you need to be on the lookout for those and then bring those in back into your organization, right? So be very proactive, as opposed to, what would happen in the more traditional sense. You would rely on procurement, some kind of centralized planning to be able to provide you with the tools you need for your job. Now, every person, every employee needs to go outside and look for new ways of solving the task or the problems that they're trying to solve by bringing new tools in.
And 3 years have passed since ChatGPT first dropped, and many organisations at the time attempted to ban their employees from using it, and for very good reasons in many cases. But fast forward 3 years to present day, what happens to organisations or professionals who now fail to adapt? Are we heading towards a widening gap between AI empowered and AI illiterate workforces? Do you think there's a danger of that happening?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that there's a danger of that happening with any technology, especially technology that's massively adopted across the market. We're going to see a wider and wider gap. And, companies will see that from their employees, and they'll see that, in terms of, are they able to hire the people they used to be able to hire before because they don't have the right capabilities or infrastructure to support their ambitions and the way they would work with AI in the modern world. They'd also feel it from their customers because their product does not support those capabilities. And they'll also feel it from competitors and investors because competitors will have some of those capabilities, and they'll be able to leap ahead and capture more of a market share. So I think that is a very clear gap that's going to be created.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. And finally, as yourselves at Augury, as you integrate AI deeply into industrial operations, I've got to ask, what lessons have you learned about balancing automation with human expertise that maybe people listening could apply and or just take away and have a think about there? Any big lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I think that there are certain applications, like the industrial applications, in the world where Augury operates, where it is extremely important to approach it with what we call, or others call a kind of a full stack approach, right? So where AI is not just given in its raw form, but rather there's a human in the loop, there's a service around it, there's a capability around it that can enable adoption, that can also put people at ease in terms of anxieties that they have in approaching it, that can integrate it into the right workflow, and also ensure the right data, the right foundations, the right integrations, take place all the way down to the hardware that's needed on the production floor. So thinking about solving a problem with AI and then thinking about what's the most effective and most accurate way to do it, and then how do we make sure that we also have people in place to be able to drive the adoption of that solution I think is the right way to think about it, right? But there are other industries where that level of accuracy, that level of capabilities are not as important. Whereas maybe creating more creative solutions would apply. So I think the lessons are that when we balance automation and human expertise, and we introduce a powerful new AI-enabled tool, we have to think about it holistically, full stack, end to end. What does it mean to plug that into an organization, and then to drive the adoption of it many years forward? So if you're in the corporate world and you're driving strategy for your organization, you need to think about it that same way, right? And if you're thinking about a company or a vendor that's providing that for you, well, do they have that same mindset and approach, right? And can they prove that they've been able to do that? I think that is kind of the biggest lesson that we've had, and that's what's actually made our customers successful so far.
And I'm conscious we've been very forward thinking today in our conversation, you passing on your expertise, the lessons that you've learned along the way and what to look out for in the future. But to finish, I'm going to take you back in time now. I want to learn who helped you get you where you are, because I think none of us are able to achieve any degree of success without a little help along the way. So is there a particular person that you're grateful towards who maybe helped you get you where you are? And we can give a little shout out to today. Who would that be and why?
Well, can I name 4 people?
Go on then. Why not? Let's go with a 4.
So there are 2 people that were kind of earlier on helping me get where I am, and really brought me to an incredible school for creating ventures, for building startups, for building product. This is David Kidder and Anne Berkovich, who are the founders of a company called Bionic that was very fortunate to join early on. And then I would say also the 2 co-founders at Augury, Gal Shaul and Sari Oskovitz, who have been friends of mine for a very long time, and also I've joined about a decade ago in order to be able to help build Augury. And I'm immensely grateful to those people, because they have really brought me to where I am today, and I could not have done it without them.
Well, a quick shout out to all 4 there. They're probably blissfully unaware on the scale of the impact that they've had on you and your career. And for everybody else listening, they want to find out more information about where we're heading, the future, how you might be able to help, and learn a bit more about anything we talked about today. Where would you like to point everyone?
Oh, well, absolutely. Come check us out at augury.com. And you can also check out my LinkedIn profile at Artem Kroupenev to see, follow if you want more info and kind of more thoughts on industrial AI, industry in general, product, things like that.
Fantastic. Well, same as the previous 2 times, I want to add links to absolutely everything. A pleasure to get you back on the podcast, and so many big topics today, because workforce costs are high. The job market across every sector is continuing to recalibrate. And instead of thinking of AI literacy as a differentiator, we should be, as you said there, be looking at it as a fundamental skill, just like basic reading and writing. So much food for thought. But thank you, as always, for shining a light on this. And I'll see you in 2026 for hopefully your 4th appearance. But thank you for joining me today.
Neil, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I think after that conversation, my big takeaway is that AI literacy isn't about learning to code or mastering prompts. It's more about reimagining how we think, how we collaborate, how we create value. And as he explained today, the most forward-thinking companies aren't just adopting AI, they're embedding it into the natural rhythm of daily work, almost encouraging experimentation and redefining success through new metrics. And again, the goal isn't replacement here, it's amplification of human creativity and judgment. And I think his examples of Augury there show that what can happen when people and AI evolve together. Productivity rises, innovation compounds, and fear slowly gives way to curiosity. And I think it offers a glimpse into the next chapter of what work could look like, especially if we approach it with open minds and practical optimism. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm the eternal optimist. You may have a different view. How do you see AI reshaping the way we learn, the way we work? And are we all ready for this new kind of literacy? Join the conversation, techtalksnetwork.com. You'll find all the information you need there on how to get hold of me and even leave an audio message. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening as always. And I'll speak with you again tomorrow. Bye for now.